Thank you for joining us here on Catholic Lives. From the Philippines, I am your host, Maria Mercedes Robles. Catholic Lives is a program that brings us face to face with exemplary men and women who serve as leaders, agents of change, and models in their own communities. Today we have as our guest a very accomplished man. He served in the public and the private sectors here in the Philippines, working in the finance sector, in housing, in banking, as well as in public service. He once served as Undersecretary of Finance. But as far as his Catholic life is concerned, lately he has been involved in the Knights of Columbus, as well as in a foundation called Heart of Francis. This and more we will discuss with our guest, but it's now time to introduce you to him. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Guillermo Hernandez. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be part of your show, Eugene.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours. Let me first ask you a little bit of what you're doing now. These are very heavy responsibilities, your involvements in the foundation, and then you were once president of the Knights of Columbus here in the country. And I did not mention in the introduction, but your involvement in the sector of persons with disabilities. How do you make time for all of these things?
Yes, that's correct. Well, I think when the Lord is with you, you always find time for everything. And in my case, it all started with having a special child. His name is Anthony, and he's the second child of my wife, Tess, and I. And that was how many years ago? We had Anthony in 1981. And of course, it was quite difficult for us to accept the fact that he's different from our other children. So we tried to look for cure, treatment for Anthony. To the point that we even migrated in the States when I would say when he was about to turn 8 years old, because the doctors in the States told us that it would be best for Anthony to stay there permanently before he reaches the age of 8. So we went there, and for the first year it was okay, but for no reason at all, he started regressing. So Anthony, who used to be high functioning, became low functioning. And we were advised that it would be best for us to just leave Anthony to an institution in the States.
That must have been a blow.
Oh yes,
to you and your wife.
Yes. So we decided to pack up, and all of us returned to the Philippines, and that was 1992. So we returned to the Philippines, and we've sold some properties in the Philippines, so we have to start all over again. Luckily, since the Lord is with us, I think the blessing just came. And it's because we've not lost focus on the fact that Anthony is our child. He's a blessing from the Lord, and that we just have to do what we can.
How is Anthony doing now?
Well, Anthony is now 34 years old. He turned 34 last August. He's now studying in a school owned by Mariter Macapagal. I'm sure a lot of people know Mariter. She was the founder of Cupertino, but unfortunately, Cupertino is no longer there because Ateneo got back the property, and Mariter is to settle for a small facility. Luckily for my child, he's one of the, I think, 9 children enrolled in the school now. A very small school, but a very good ratio because 5 teachers and 9 students. So very, very good for my son. that's in San Juan. So he goes there every day, except weekends. And after school, he would go to the park, he would go to the mall, you know. Because what's important for Anthony is that he is always on the move, he's always attended to, and he has something to do. He loves to paint, he loves art, yeah, and he loves to eat.
Many families have a situation like yours, having a special child afflicted with autism and other conditions. But not all families face the problem the way you, Tess, and your other children did. What was the key? What was the turning point that led you to look at this problem, but renew your faith in the process? Were there people around you who helped?
Guess, thinking about it, perhaps it's going back to your marital vows, because I recall my wife has always been telling me that it's actually a triumvirate between and among the two of us and the Lord. So I guess that's it. When you have no one to turn to, you go back to the Lord, and that's what we hold on to in very difficult times. I'm not when I was in college, as well as before I got married, people would say I'm not the marrying type. They would always say I'm the least likely to succeed in marriage, but as it turned out, I did okay, thanks to my wife and the Lord. And I guess Anthony also, because after Anthony, then we really have to focus more in the family, you know, and not just Anthony, because we have 4 kids. And my 3 kids are all very successful. My eldest son, who's a pilot, commercial pilot, is already 36 years old. My 3rd son, the name of my first son is Jay, you know, he's my junior. Then my 3rd son is William Francis. He's in business. And my 4th child, the only girl, her name is Trina Ann Catherine. She's now an assistant vice president of, senior assistant vice president of Banco de Oro.
Wow, congratulations.
Yes, they're all okay.
Accomplished
However,
family.
there's one thing lacking, because we don't have any apos, because none of them is married.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this has something to do to the fact that we have an Anthony, and that they're very, very cautious.
Oh, you'll get to that, don't worry. But going back to Anthony, how did you assist your 3 other children in relating to him, dealing with him, attending to his needs, and being your assistants in caring for a special child?
You know, that's quite difficult, no? Because as they were growing up, and you know, the age, if you look at the ages of my kids, the first and second, 2 years apart, the second and third, 1.5 years apart, the third and fourth, 5 days less than 1 year. So can you imagine, parang hagdanan yan. I always see people looking at us when we go to the malls or church. Sabi siguro, masyado kaming masipag, no? But that's how we planned it, no? Because I got married at the age of 29, and I want to have a family, a complete family, as soon as possible. So, but for my children, my other children, there are times they couldn't understand how come Anthony is different from them, and as well as from the rest of the other children. But you know, prayers and explaining to them that Anthony or Anton is really like that, and we just have to accept him, no? Because that's what he is. In fact, there are situations where Anthony would be not really maltreated, but people would treat him differently, and my other children are even the first ones to react and defend him at a very young age. So I guess again, it's the Lord. It's not us. I cannot claim credit for that.
Right. But in what concrete ways did Anton serve as a sort of glue to keep you and your wife together and to keep you and the children united in your family? Could be quite a challenge, no?
For me, I guess it makes me think twice, thrice, or even more before I get tempted. Like, you know, when I was younger, there are a lot of temptations in life, no? But when you have a special child like Anthony, then you really have to make sure that your family is complete, your family is well provided, because I've seen a lot of children in the Philippines, special children, and they're not well taken care of because the parents are not focused on them. The parents would even not rather introduce them as their own. Nahihiya pa sila. And not well provided for, because it's quite expensive also to have a special child.
Was having Anton also instrumental in opening up the avenues for you to serve the church with your involvements now? Tell us a little bit more about that.
How should I put it? Of course, we pray. And at first, we always pray that Anton would get better, or the condition could be reversed. But it reached a point that it dawned on us that it's no longer a possibility. So, by accepting it, it would require you to continue praying that in having an Anton in your life, what else can you do? And of course, the best that you can do is try to serve, or try to be an example, and at the same time serve people who are similarly situated as Anton. That's why my wife started becoming involved in PWDs. In fact, in our own barangay, I think I mentioned it earlier, she is an officer, and always an officer. For a time, she was also president of the, they call it PERDISCO. PERDISCO is actually an acronym for Persons with Disabilities and Company, and that's in Barangay San Lorenzo in Makati. And I think my wife can be very proud to say that PERDISCO is one of the best PWD organizations, one of the best PWD organizations in the country.
All right, thank you for sharing all of these things to us. We're not done yet, we're only halfway through. When we return here on Catholic Lives, we will ask our guest, Mr. Hernandez, to share with us more insights about how he nurtured that faith that was renewed through their son, Anton, a special gift, a special child. We will be right back. Stay with us.
The Eucharist, its celebration is at the heart of the church. This is the great memory of the church, the event of the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus, his victory, his presence amongst us that brings us hope of eternal glory. And so we say that the Eucharist is at the heart of the church, very important. And the coming Eucharistic Congress is supposed to highlight that, to raise consciousness of this worship and prayer and celebration of faith in the church. We cannot think of church without the celebration of the Eucharist, because again, this is the foundation of our faith, the presence of the risen Lord in our lives. And it is this good news that we bring to our people. In other words, the Eucharist also, by our participation in it, pushes us, give us the joy and the courage to go on mission.
You're back with us here on Catholic Lives. I am your host, Maria Mercedes Robles, and we are interviewing Mr. Guillermo Hernandez. Mr. Hernandez, being a parent nowadays is already difficult as it is, but you and your wife were faced with a very big challenge, caring and loving a special child afflicted with autism. What did the two of you do? What did you do when you were visited by doubt, when you felt discouraged? Where did you turn to? Did you have special devotions? Did you turn to particular people for strength, for guidance?
As I said earlier, I think the people you turn to when you're set with a problem like this is you go to people in the medical field. In fact, we had to go abroad just to find possibly the right treatment and cure for Anthony. But when it reaches a point that nothing can be done about it anymore, then I guess you just have to talk it out and accept it. That's number one, acceptance. And after acceptance, you need to have somebody to guide you or to be with you. And that's what I'm referring to earlier, that when a couple get married, part of that union is the Lord. So I'm not that spiritual, I have to admit. But you just have to go to the Lord and ask Him to be with you, to be able to confront and live with this problem, because this is a problem you have to live with. And mind you, people afflicted with autism, they live long, because unlike people with Down syndrome, many of them have congenital heart disease. People with autism are very healthy. They eat a lot. They're always smiling, they're always laughing, although sometimes, you can't understand how come they're laughing, how come they're smiling. That's why they say they have their own world. So they sleep long. And that's why we're told that my son Anthony can live up to 80 or more. So we just have to prepare ourselves for that and prepare our children, other children as well. Although we do think that it may be unfair for the other children to take care of him when we're gone, but I think we were able to without really pressuring them to do that. Although I could also think that perhaps that's the reason also why my other 3 children are not yet married up to now. I don't know, or perhaps people nowadays, they don't marry that young anymore. No,
They're just taking their time.
yeah. So it's still the Lord who's gonna take over and run our lives.
Mr. Hernandez, what words of advice can you share with our parents out there who are facing a similar situation as yours? Maybe they have just discovered that their child is afflicted with autism, or that they're already dealing with a growing child with this condition, your words of wisdom?
Number one, even when you notice something different in your child, you really have to bring him to a doctor to find out what the problem is. In our case, Anton was only 1 year and 3 months when we noticed something was different. Because Anton, and even earlier, because Anton could walk at the age of 10 months. He destroyed two playpens, one crib. He was very strong. So some things, do I have a child who's bound to be a Superman? But the attention span was very short. So we brought him to a doctor, and then they told us that, your son is attention deficiency disorder. And then later on, they told us your son has pervasive developmental disorder. And then later on, they said it's most likely autism. But early intervention helps, not only medical, but even educational. So that's the first. And then second, you should never be ashamed of having a child who's different. As they say, they're just differently abled. Hindi naman disabled, no? Differently abled. So that's very, very important, no? You have to accept na ganyan siya, wag niyong ikahiya. At yun nga, involve the family. And when I say family, not just your wife, your children, but even your extended family, because you need a lot of support. It's good in the States. They have behavioral therapies. They have therapies who would help you work it out with your family. But here, I don't think we're that developed. And lastly, I would say, go back to the Lord, as I said earlier. That's the most important.
And then how can they go back to the Lord? They say, but we go to church already. So what else can we do? What is the big deal about living a Eucharistic life?
Yeah.
What else should we do as Christians, as Catholics?
When I say go back to the Lord, you just don't go back to the Lord for your child. You go back to the Lord for other children who are similarly situated. No? Because you were given the chance to experience this, and you can share this, you can help others. And that's the reason why we're involved in PWD organizations. I think that's the best way. Hindi naman lahat ng biyaya sa atin, no? We have to share it. We have to share it. And definitely having a special child is a blessing. If I may share with you, I'm not a highly spiritual or religious person, but one thing that I learned is that, and I always pray for, is that God gives me, all of us have conscience, but give me more conscience and give me the heart, because I need to function. We need to function with our hearts, not with our minds. Puso ang kailangan po.
Right. Looking at your professional profile, I could see that you have taken a big leap from being a finance guy, working in government, as high up as being an undersecretary, and then an accomplished banking and housing executive, and now doing work for the Lord, helping PWDs and being active in many Catholic foundations. Did you ever feel that you were, while you were a professional, an accomplished professional, you were being primed up for this, that those were building blocks for you to get to this point when you will be challenged, having a special child, and then working to help others?
Well, I never thought about it, just happened. No? As I said, when you give it to the Lord, I think it just happens. No? And in my case, it was never planned. No? I think a person can plan out your career, but when it comes to something that's very much related to the Lord, I don't know, I never planned it. It just happened. My involvement in the Knights of Columbus, my involvement in PWDs, with CBCP, News, Areopagus, and now with the Heart of Francis Foundation, it just happened. That's why when I talked to Monsi, in fact, we had a Christmas party last year, or last December, I was telling Monsi that this is totally different from the corporate world, because no business plans, no corporate strategies, no budgeting. But when you're called to do something, you just do it. And so far, we've been successful. Monsi and I had, I can't claim credit for that. No, I was part of it, that we were able to build two chapels in the Knights of Columbus. And yeah, of course, the papal visit, we were involved there, and now and then Tacloban last week, the launching of the, I don't know if you've seen it, the coffee table book for Pope Francis, Mercy and Compassion. We launched it last Sunday in Palo, the Archdiocese of Palo, with Archbishop John Du, and I would say it's quite successful, because we've been getting a lot of calls, a lot of communications asking where they can buy this coffee table book.
Congratulations on all these projects.
Well,
and activities.
Most welcome.
Serving our fellow Christians and helping families. Do you have last words for our audience who are tuned in, who are looking for inspiration, how they can be renewed in their faith, regardless of what circumstances they're in, and especially if they are having difficulties in their lives?
I don't want to sound repetitive, but as I said earlier, the Lord should always be part of our lives. We cannot forget Him, no matter how successful you may be in life. The Lord has got to be part of it. And I'm addressing this not only to families who has a son or a daughter afflicted with autism or other forms of disabilities or being differently able, but I'm sharing you this from the bottom of my heart, that is the only way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hernandez, for sharing your insights as well as your life story with us. Very inspiring indeed. And we thank you for joining us here on Catholic Lives. Today we heard another touching story about how each one of us can take in the joys as well as the sorrows in our journey with our Lord. Join us again next time here on Catholic Lives. From the Philippines, I'm your host, Maria Mercedes Robles. Thank you.
Lord, you lay down your life as bread and wine we see, gave strength.